Well, welcome again to Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today I'm talking about a topic that I talked about a few weeks ago. This is the 2016 presidential election here in the United States. Donald Trump is wooing evangelical Christian voters to get behind him in his run for presidency. And a lot of evangelical Bible-believing Christians are more than willing to jump on the Trump bandwagon and support him. We're seeing this happening all the time. Now the question is Trump sincere? Is he telling the truth? Does he really love evangelicals, as he keeps repeating? He says he loves evangelicals. He says he loves Christianity. He says he's a Christian. He says he goes to church. And on and on and on. But is this just a con job? Is this just saying whatever he needs to say to win the evangelical vote to become president? It doesn't seem to be worrying Christians that here we have a candidate talking in terms of Christianity, and yet his entire past life, his business deals, his mannerisms, his way of speaking, his way of dealing with people and conducting himself in the world does not look like someone who is trying to follow Jesus Christ, who is trying to pray his way through life, who is trying to read the Bible and sincerely follow its teachings. It doesn't look like that is Donald Trump. And yet Christians are flocking to his side and willing to almost overlook everything to support this man. Now, the latest person who is doing this is a president of a leading evangelical Christian university, Liberty University in Virginia, Jerry Falwell Jr., the son of the late Jerry Falwell, the television pastor and preacher and founder of Liberty College. And now his son, Jerry Falwell Jr., is president of Liberty University, now it's called. And he invited Donald Trump to speak in front of all of the students, and he gave almost what you could call a glowing endorsement of Donald Trump. Now, I'm not going to replay the entire introduction that Jerry Falwell Jr. gave Donald Trump because that's too long for this program, but I will play an interview that he gave shortly after, just a matter of hours after Donald Trump came to Liberty University. He gave an interview where he explained why he was willing to say good things about Donald Trump. Basically said the same things he said in his introduction, and I wanted to comment on that.
We're going to protect Christianity, and I can say that. I don't have to be politically correct, or we're going to protect it. If you look what's going on throughout the world, you look at Syria, where if you're Christian, they're chopping off heads. You look at the different places, and Christianity, it's under siege.
All right, that was Donald Trump speaking to students at Liberty University in Lynchburg earlier today. Now, Trump vowed to set aside political correctness and protect Christianity around the globe. Here with reaction, the president of Liberty University, Jerry Falwell Jr. It wasn't quite an endorsement, but many people took it as almost one when you said, you introduced him as one of the greatest visionaries of our time, and you've remained in close contact with him. Does your position prevent you from endorsing? That kind of sounded like an endorsement.
Well, Liberty University is a non-profit 501c3 university, so of course Liberty cannot endorse candidates, and we invite all the candidates to come speak. But I got to know Donald Trump after he spoke here in 2012, and I learned so much about him that the public never hears, and I wanted to share that with our audience. Right after he visited here last time, I called him about a large Christian ministry in another state that needed some help. I learned within a day or two he had donated $100,000 of his own money. He learned about Clyde Frazier Jr., who ran the Harlem Hoops tournament in the inner city and was killed in the 9/11 attacks, and he searched down the family and he donated the money to keep that tournament going. Example after example like that of just generosity that never made it into the public's eye. His limousine broke down one time. A couple stopped and helped him. he paid off their mortgage a few days later. These are all things that you never hear about Donald Trump because he comes across as sort of a tough businessman. And it just reminded me so much of my father, because my father would make politically incorrect statements all those years, and in real life and in his personal relationships with people, he gave away so many scholarships to students at Liberty. He almost bankrupted the school here, and he always was just giving away. He was always.
Yeah, scholarship, and I know that's true. Here's one thing people didn't know about your dad. The limousine story is interesting. So a couple stopped to help him, and he paid off their mortgage. That's pretty impressive. And people would say, okay, well, he has the money to do it, but there are a lot of wealthy people that don't do things like that. But I knew something about your dad.
And he heard. No, I was going to tell you, on 60 Minutes, Trump was watching a report about a Maytag plant that moved out of Iowa into Mexico. And the 3 companies in that report, he actually searched them out. They were about to go out of business because Maytag had left, and he found ways to buy products from those companies through his hotels to keep them in business. He gave them money to the local Domino's pizza restaurant so they could buy cheese and bread and keep their business in business. And those are just things I thought the world needed to know about Donald Trump, because the Bible says, by their fruits you shall know them. And he may not be a theological expert, and he might say 2 Corinthians instead of 2 Corinthians, but when you look at the fruits of his life and all the people he's provided jobs, I think that's the true test of somebody's Christianity, not whether or not they use the right theological terms. But I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
You told me on my radio show a while back, and you mentioned this today, and by the way, there's pictures of Convocation. I've had the honor to speak there, and that is an experience like no other. It's amazing. But you see a lot of your dad in Donald Trump. That I think surprised a lot of people. Explain.
Well, my father was criticized for supporting Ronald Reagan over Jimmy Carter, because Ronald Reagan was a Hollywood actor who had been divorced and remarried. Jimmy Carter was a Sunday school teacher, and my father said, he said proudly that Jesus said, render unto Caesar, and that means be good citizens, be voting citizens. And he said, when I go in the voting booth, I'm not electing a Sunday school teacher or a theologian or somebody who agrees with my theological views. I'm voting for the person who is most qualified to be the President of the United States. And the qualities that are required to be the President are not always the same ones that make a good Sunday school teacher. Prime example of that is Jimmy Carter. He was a great Sunday school teacher, but look what he did to our country as president. And so those are the kind of things that remind me of my father and Trump. And I think just the personal generosity. I noticed at the debate in Charleston the other night, he was the only candidate who came down off the stage and greeted the crowd personally, posed for pictures. Everybody else was too important, too busy, too tired. And that's the kind of thing that, you know, we've been promised as evangelicals and conservatives. So many promises have been made to us by career politicians over the last few decades. You know, I told the crowd this morning, the polls seem to indicate the founding fathers believed that this country should be governed by citizen legislators. And I think the polls are starting to indicate that the American public want to see somebody who has succeeded in real life, not career politicians. And I think that's why he's surging.
First thing that he talks about is how Donald Trump is different privately when you talk to him alone than he is in front of a crowd. He says you really don't know the man, Donald Trump, until you actually talk to him privately. He tries to come across as a tough businessman, but underneath that all, he's really got a tender heart, and he's got compassion, and so forth and so on. But my question is, if that is the case, isn't that something, a mark against Donald Trump? Isn't that hypocrisy? If he's coming across a certain way when he's in front of a crowd, and yet when he steps back from the crowd and the platform and he's talking to people one-on-one, if he's completely different personality, if he's a different person, if he comes across totally different, that isn't a positive mark, that's a negative mark, because that's called hypocrisy. That's called being two-faced. Now, I can't understand why Christian leaders don't see that, because in the Christian church, in the Christian world, hypocrisy is a sin. Jesus railed and preached against the sin of hypocrisy when he saw it in the Pharisees. And so I don't understand why Christians are willing to overlook such a major problem of character as hypocrisy. If indeed Donald Trump is so different when you meet him privately than he is in front of people, if this boastful, arrogant, vain, confrontative, argumentative, insulting, bullying kind of personality in front of the crowd is actually sort of mild-mannered, humble, compassionate, sensitive behind the scenes, then that is a problem, not a solution. That is a negative, not a plus. And so I can't understand why people like Jerry Falwell Jr. would bring this up and try to convince people, oh, he's different when you talk to him personally. That is not something that is positive. That's a negative. That means he's hypocritical. That means he's two-faced, and he can't be trusted. Now, Donald Trump comes across as this tough guy in front of people, and yet, according to Christian leaders, when they meet him, he's not a tough guy behind the scenes. This is the same message we heard when Ben Carson recently endorsed Donald Trump and encouraged others to join him in supporting Donald Trump. Now, I respect Dr. Ben Carson. I believe he is a sincere man, and I believe that he is the same when he's in front of a crowd or whether he's talking to you privately. So I don't understand why Ben Carson would therefore get up in front of a crowd to endorse Donald Trump and say, people, you don't understand it. There are two Donald Trumps. There's the one you see in front of the crowds, in front of the podium, on television, in interviews. There's that one, and he's a warrior battler. But then when you talk to him behind the scenes, he's a completely different person. And Dr. Ben Carson is saying that's a positive character trait. Well, it's not a positive character trait. It's a negative character trait. It means he's two-faced and he's a hypocrite. And that's the problem. We have Christian leaders like Jerry Falwell Jr. and now apparently Dr. Ben Carson who are willing to overlook things that we as Christians should not be willing to overlook. We need to look into those things and to see if that's going to be a problem. Because normally when someone is two-faced, when they appear one way in public but are totally different in private, that's a problem. And so we need to examine these things. We need to not just cover over them for the sake of winning. Because if you win with someone who promises you the moon, you have won nothing. Because he's promised you the moon, he will not deliver on those promises. And so we need to be careful before we simply support someone who is insincere. Now, Dr. Jerry Falwell Jr., the president of Liberty University, goes on. He says that Donald Trump is generous. He says that you won't hear these things, but I learned that he gave a huge sum of money to a Christian ministry that was in need. And that his limousine, when it broke down, some people helped him and he paid off their mortgage. And on and on and on, these little scenes. Well, I wonder how Jerry Falwell Jr. learned these things. Did he learn them from the Trump camp? Did he learn them from people who want Jerry Falwell Jr.'s support? How did he learn about those things? Donald Trump must have said something or must have leaked that out. Again, are these people that are being endorsing of Donald Trump, are they really being led astray? Now, one of the curious things that Jerry Falwell Jr. says here is, he says, it's like in the Bible when Jesus says you will know them by their fruits, and Donald Trump has been a successful businessman, so we know him by his fruits, and his fruits in business have been success. I can't believe someone like a Christian university president would say something like this. This is not what Jesus is talking about. Jesus says you will know them by their fruits. You look at their life and you will know them by their fruits, what they produce. Jerry Falwell Jr. evidently wants to apply that to the business skills and acumen and success in business. Under that category, interpretation of that passage, you might well say that Jerry Falwell Jr. would endorse Bill Gates. He was a successful businessman. Or you might, Stephen Jobs, he was a successful businessman, made billions of dollars. You might say Warren Buffett would be someone you would know by their fruit because he is one of the richest men in the world, and so on and so forth, under that interpretation. But of course, that's not what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about business success. Jesus is the Savior. He's talking about spiritual and moral fruit of a person's life. Does the person's life exhibit the moral results, the moral fruit of a changed heart? Does a person's life exhibit the spiritual and righteous fruit of a life committed to God? It's talking about, the passage is talking about clearly the moral and spiritual fruit of a person's life. That's how you're to judge a prophet. A false prophet, even though they may be saying good things, if their life doesn't reflect the reality of what they're speaking about, you can dismiss them. And I think that passage, if you apply it properly in context about what Jesus is speaking about, he's not speaking about business success. He's not speaking about career success. He's not speaking about sporting success. You could say that about any successful athlete. You could say, well, this person's fruit, you shall know them by their fruits. And see, Pete Rose was a great baseball player, and so we know him by his fruits, or whoever you want to point to. No, it's not talking about that kind of fruit. It's talking about the moral and spiritual expression of a person's heart. And Jesus says you can judge a false prophet, you can judge a false teacher by the way they conduct themselves and the fruit of their life and the fruit of their teachings and the fruit of their attitude. You can look at their life and you can see righteousness come forth, you can see truth come forth, and you will be able to judge them. That's what he's talking about. And if you go to any commentary, if you go to any kind of scholarly exegesis of the passage, you're going to find that that is the standard understanding of the passage, where Jesus is talking about the fruit of a person's life. He's talking about the moral and spiritual fruit of the person's life. He's not talking about business success, so you can't apply it to that. Jerry Falwell Jr. is misapplying Scripture in front of thousands and thousands of students at a Christian college, and he should be called to task for that. Now, if you apply the test, the true test that Jesus is enunciating in this passage, you will look at the life of Donald Trump and you will say, okay, what kind of moral and spiritual truth come forth from this man? Well, first of all, you will see, as far as his life goes, as far as his Christian fruit and works, he's lacking in almost every category. It is clearly evident from his life that he has put his entire life as a priority of business. Business has been his life. And so on Sunday mornings, are you going to find him in church? Probably you're going to find him doing business deals, because that's his idol. That's what he cares about mostly in life. He has made business success and making money and doing deals his God. And he has made money, or mammon, his idol. And so why point to the fruit of his life as a positive example when it should be a negative example? Look at his family life. He has divorced 2 women and he's married to the third woman. Now, why has he failed twice in marriage? Well, it's very simple. He puts business deals and making money ahead of marriage. He puts making money and cutting business deals ahead of his marriage and his wife. He puts it ahead of family life. Now, there are people that say, well, his kids love him, and I'm sure he loves his kids. But he didn't put the family and the marriage that he was involved in twice ahead of his business. He actually put his money making and his other business ventures ahead of his family life. That is not good fruit. That is a bad priority. He has followed material mammon idols, and Jesus warns about people doing that. He says, don't make money your God. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and those things will be provided for you. Do not seek after those things supremely. Put God first. And Donald Trump has not done that. He's done the opposite. He's put money, he's put business ventures, he's put success in the business world ahead of everything else. And so when you look at the passage that Jesus is explaining, you will know them by their fruits. It's the exact opposite of what Donald Trump is doing. You know him by his fruits, his failed marriages, his multiple bankruptcies, leaving people who he owes money on the hook. He's not going to pay them. He's going to walk away from the deal. Whatever is best for Donald Trump is what Donald Trump will do. And he's doing the same thing with the evangelical Christian world. He is cutting deals with people. He's presenting to them business propositions. He's making a deal with them, and they're naive enough in dealing with this master deal maker that they can't see through what he's doing. And he is hoodwinking multiple millions of Christians, even Christian leaders. Jerry Falwell Jr. has also been hoodwinked by this wheeler dealer businessman. And so you will know them by their fruits. Yes, we will know him by his fruits. He has been for pro-abortion. He has written checks to many, many far-left, liberal, immoral, progressive causes. He thinks that his sister, who is for late-term abortions, he thinks she would be a good judge on the Supreme Court. It is clear as day that if you look at this man, his life, look at the fruit of his life, he is not someone who Christians should be rallying around. He is insincere, and he's not going to come through on his promises. Now, I wish I could say that this is our champion. I wish I could say that this is he's sincere, it's the real deal, but I cannot say that. And when someone like a Jerry Falwell Jr. or a Dr. Ben Carson says, well, you don't know Donald Trump. The real Donald Trump is hard to see. He's in front, he's fighting for the cause, but when he's behind the scenes, he's a totally different person. That scares me. It doesn't comfort me. And so if you're telling me that there's a person who is projecting a persona in public, but then behind the scenes he's different, that's an insincere person. That's a dishonest person. I want to see a person who's the same in public and the same in private. I want to see a person that I believe like a Ben Carson is, who, when you see him in public, he is the same as he is in private. He does talk the same in public as he does in private. He's one and the same. He's not a hypocrite. Donald Trump, if it's true that he's one way in front of people and he's one way behind the scenes in private, that's hypocrisy. We don't want to rally behind a hypocrite. We don't want to believe his marketing campaign. He says he's pro-life. He says he's against abortion. His record and his words don't show that. Everything shows that he actually doesn't care about abortion. Because Donald Trump is about one person, Donald Trump. Donald Trump is out to benefit one person, Donald Trump. He doesn't care about abortion. It's not a passion of his. He's an unprincipled utilitarian. Whatever gets the job done for Donald Trump, that's what Donald Trump wants to do. Get the job done. So do not be taken in by this man. He doesn't really look out for your best interest, Christian. And I hope that Christians wise up and realize he is being insincere. Now, I want to just finish up here. I wanted you to see how Christians are trying to figure out what to do with Donald Trump. This is an example of a Christian who's been taken in by Donald Trump, who has bought his marketing line, but I don't believe we should follow the example of Jerry Falwell Jr. I believe that we should not fall behind Donald Trump. We have to hear a lot more than just him saying he loves evangelicals. This is a man, after all, who cannot come to bring himself to say that he asked God for forgiveness of sins. He totally misunderstands what the gospel of Jesus Christ is. He totally misunderstands. He is approaching Christians as a political bloc. He's saying, we've got to fight for Christianity. He's saying all the things. He's saying all the right words. But underneath it all is a utilitarian pragmatism that says, I will do whatever I need to say and whatever I need to do to make the deal, to close the deal. And so with Christians, he's saying, I got to push these right buttons, and if I push those right buttons, those Christians are going to fall behind me because they don't have anybody else to vote for, and I'm cutting them a deal, and they're going to go along with me. Well, we need to step back and we need to say, look, what good is it to have a person who says he's pro-life and pro-family and pro-Christian who can't be trusted, who isn't sincere, who's one way in public and another way in private? What good is it? What good is the word of a person who will change his position to suit his needs? Donald Trump has changed his mind about almost everything except one thing: himself. He believes he has to be number one. He believes he has to come out the winner. He believes he's got to look out for himself, and he will say and do whatever he needs to do that. And we as Christians need to think deeper, and we need to reflect, and we need to not be taken in by worldly powers. Jerry Falwell Jr. has been hypnotized by a billionaire. When Jerry Falwell and his wife visit Manhattan, he goes up to the Trump Towers, and he's impressed by that. Christians, that should not impress us. We want a man who's a principled conservative, who believes in the sanctity of human life out of principle, who believes in the traditional family values out of principle, who believes in the traditional definition of marriage by principle, not just by expedience, not by just saying whatever people need to hear at the moment. We need a man who really believes these things and not just says them. So Christians, pray a lot more, think a lot more, and we'll see you back here next time on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.